We are a little more than 24 hours away from a vote to confirm Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. The vote right now too close to call, with a few fence-sitters yet to make their decisions, but Majority Leader Mitch McConnell appears to be on the verge of what could be the biggest victory of his political career.
By confirming Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, this brilliant jurist will be charged with upholding the rule of law and honoring American justice. We must hold ourselves to that very same standard.
Kristen Fisher is on Capitol Hill. Kristen.
Well, Dana, Senate Majority Leader Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, he's already a master at getting conservative judges confirmed. Right now, he has a perfect track record, 26 for 26 in terms of confirming President Trump's federal appeals court nominees. Last year, he easily guided Judge Neil Gorsuch to a seat on the Supreme Court. And the year before, he kept a more liberal judge off it, Judge Merrick Garland. But this time, with Judge Kavanaugh, what he's been doing is he's been taking that uncanny ability to delay and he's been putting it in reverse, and that has infuriated Democrats like Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
From the man who single-handedly delayed the filling of Justice Scalia's seat for 10 months to complain about a 1-week delay to get the truth, give me a break.
Well, whether you like McConnell's politics or not, it's hard to argue with the fact that his tactics have proven to be truly effective, highly effective in terms of what he's been able to do. And now, Dana, he's really on the cusp of what could be one of his greatest accomplishments in his entire 33 years in the Senate.
And that is saying something, Kristen. Has he said anything about the impact this particular vote will have on his own legacy? I know he's a man of few words.
He is, and he hasn't said anything yet about the impact that this will have on his own legacy, but he did say this to his fellow senators while speaking on the Senate floor just a few hours ago.
Every one of us will go on record with one of the most consequential votes you ever cast in the Senate. The United States Senate will also be making a statement. Whether the state that partisan politics can override the presumption of innocence, or we'll reaffirm that in the United States of America, everyone is innocent until proven guilty.
And no doubt there is so much at stake for the Senate, for the Supreme Court, for the entire country. But Dana, this is truly a legacy-making moment for Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Dana?
Indeed, Kristen, thank you. So the Senate race in one reliably red state, well, it's heating up. Why Tennessee is suddenly in play. Plus, the Democrats turning Brett Kavanaugh into a political punching bag, but has that strategy backfired? As Republicans try to keep their majority in the Senate, the race in deep red Tennessee is turning into quite a fight, according to a Fox News poll. Republican Marsha Blackburn is ahead of Democrat Phil Bredesen by 5 points, which is within the margin of error. All this as we learn the Kavanaugh nomination could be having an impact. Peter Dufsey is live in Nashville. Peter, what did the Democrat in this race do that sets him apart from most Democrats in the Senate?
Dana, he said that he would have voted for Kavanaugh if he had the chance. That's something only one Democrat in the Senate actually did today, Joe Manchin. The Democratic candidate here in the Senate race is Phil Bredesen. He's a former governor who still carries a 51% approval rating and says, quote, "I was prepared to say yes to his nomination prior to Dr. Ford's coming forward. While the subsequent events make it a much closer call, and I am missing key pieces of information that a sitting senator has, I'm still a yes." But that statement took Bredesen a while. He did not weigh in for weeks, and we got the statement in our inboxes today at the same time that senators back in D.C. were actually voting. Dana.
But how does Marsha Blackburn think the Kavanaugh confirmation process has impacted her campaign? Because across the board, the Republicans are saying they're raising more money, they're having more engagement, and that it's been a real boost.
And that's something that we've seen in a couple different swing states this week. I spoke to Blackburn earlier today, and she told me that she has definitely observed a change in voters from the time that the Kavanaugh confirmation started.
They are appalled at what has happened through this confirmation process. They want Brett Kavanaugh confirmed. And they have watched this campaign of personal destruction and character assassination play out. And they are absolutely horrified as to what that could mean for their children or their siblings or their spouse.
This morning at a breakfast in Lawrenceburg, Blackburn's biggest applause lines were all about the Supreme Court, and she even had a crowd of Tennessee voters booing California's Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein. So the things that had the voters here most riled up today were national issues as opposed to the local ones. Dana.
All right, Peter, thank you. Republicans are looking to use Democrats' attack on Brett Kavanaugh to their advantage ahead of the midterms. This as high-profile Democrats like Dianne Feinstein continue to oppose the nominee.
Judges are expected to be, quote, even-handed, unbiased, impartial, and courteous, end quote. However, at the hearing last week, we saw a man filled with anger and aggression. Judge Kavanaugh raised his voice. He interrupted senators. He accused of Democrats of, quote, lying in wait, end quote.
Joining me now is Donna Brazile, former interim national chair of the Democratic National Committee. She is also the co-author of a new book for colored girls who have considered politics, which I highly recommend, and it is just out. And we're glad that you could be on the show today.
Always good to see you, and happy belated anniversary.
Oh, I thank you so much. Let me ask you this. Donna, you've been around, you know politics. Have the Democrats managed in this scenario to energize the opposition and depress their base if the outcome is going to be that Kavanaugh gets a vote?
No, let me just say this. I think both sides are galvanized. They're energized. They're energized because many people believe Dr. Christine Ford. They applaud her for coming forward, for having the courage to tell her story. And of course, you hear from the other side that they're galvanized, that they want to see another conservative on the court. So I think it has energized both the left as well as the right. But you know, there are so many unknowns in 32 days. People are already casting their ballot across the country. Early voting has started. People are sending in their absentee ballots. 32 days is a lot of time in American politics.
And there's been some movement, too. We can look here at this NPR Marist poll, and if you look at suburban women, okay, so you look at over time, over the past 3 weeks, the Democrats had quite a lead at 61 to 26, but you see over the last 3 weeks, Donna, that has really shrank. And do you think that's because of Kavanaugh and or because Republicans are starting to come home?
I think Republicans were always going to go back to their basically their principles and their foundations as Republicans. But, you know, the unknown here is not just suburban women. It is millennials, young women. You see them filling the halls of Congress. They want to be heard. They wanted to hear from Dr. Ford. So that's another unknown. And
are you stunned by the number, the record number of new registered voters this year?
No, I'm not. This is an amazing, incredible year, and you can call it the Trump effect if you believe that's what's galvanizing people. I really do believe that millennials are feeling that this is the cycle in which they want to make their voices known, and you will see a lot more millennials at the ballot box this fall than we've seen in previous midterms.
Do you think that President Trump has been able to win some of their support?
Well, that remains to be seen, but I can tell you this much. They are running in record numbers. Many of them are Democrats. You see a lot of minority women running across the country. I do believe at the end of the day, 32 days from today, we will look at the Kavanaugh effect. I call it the 40-day effect because it's been 40 days since we learned about the allegations that Dr. Ford made. And now I think most Americans want to see what the FBI concluded so that they can come to their own conclusion.
Let me ask you about just zooming out, because I was thinking the country feels so polarized.
Yes.
And you have families and friends and even workplace, right? Everyone's at each other's throats, division that feels like no one could ever get back. Did it feel like this back in 2000 during Bush v. Gore after that election?
Well, I have to go back to 1991. I was a congressional staffer when those amazing, courageous Democratic women led by my former boss, Eleanor Holmes Norton, Pat Schroeder, Jolene Ansell, Patsy May, Barbara Boxer, Nita Lloyd, and Louise Slaughter. I was the advanced person. I can tell you as a 31-year-old woman how I felt. But today it feels even let me just say, I've had a gut-wrenching moment to feel this anger inside again, the trauma of seeing another woman come forward with her story. So it's been an amazing time for all of us.
Now, how did you were a part of the effort to try to bring people back together. Do you think that's possible here, especially if we're no longer going to have a 60-vote threshold?
Right.
Is this the future of nominations in the Senate?
Unfortunately, Judge Kavanaugh said it himself. And, you know, last week he said what goes around comes around, and the whirlwind, it feels more like a hurricane force is going to hit us in the future. Look, I don't know if it started when Mitch McConnell decided not to give Merrick Garland a hearing, or the explosive revelations of the last week about Judge Kavanaugh. All I know, Dana, is that we're at a tipping point moment in this country. The Me Too movement is not going away. How are we going to deal with it in the future?
But what about just the fundamental question of being innocent until proven guilty? That can't be flipped on its head.
But what about the other fundamental issue of having a story, having experienced some form of trauma, and seeing someone rise and not be able to tell your truth? So this can be a teachable moment. She was able to tell her story, which was great, and others have been able to come forward and tell their story. We need to give everyone an opportunity to have their story told. Now that we've heard from Dr. Ford and many others, we've heard Mr. Kavanaugh's response, I think the American people will make up their own mind. I would love to see the FBI report. Look, I've gone through background checks, so have you.
I know. The first thing they ask is, like, do they drink too much? And if that's the case, then you basically, there's like not too many other following questions.
Well, can I tell you, taxes, drug use, there's so many things on a
bribery, all of those things. Donna Brazile, what's exciting is that you're going to be on the 5 tonight. You're filling in for Juan Williams. We're excited to have you. Of course, the rest of the cast will be there. You know your best friend, your new best friend, Jesse Waters, will be there as well. All right, Donna Brazile, check out her new book. It's called For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Politics. A really great book, and great for people of all ages.
And all colors.
And all colors, that's true, of course. All right, thank you, Donna. Now, you're looking live at the Senate floor, where Susan Collins is set to announce her vote on Brett Kavanaugh. That will be at the top of the hour. Plus, controversy at Facebook, employees upset at a company executive who was sitting behind the Supreme Court nominee during his hearing. And check out the Daily Briefing on social media, on Twitter at Daily Briefing. We take you behind the scenes on Instagram at Daily Briefing FNC, and you can like our Facebook page too.
Nominee shaping the future of America's highest court for decades to come. It will happen in 19 minutes, we're told. We'll take you live to the Senate floor, top of the hour on Shepard Smith reporting.
A live look at the Senate floor, where, as Shep said, Susan Collins is set to announce her vote on Judge Brett Kavanaugh. She may well be the deciding vote on whether Kavanaugh will be confirmed. The fight over the nomination, of course, unfolding along highly partisan lines. David Brooks writing in the New York Times. Among the commentators I've seen and read, those who support Democrats embrace his accuser's narrative and dismiss Kavanaugh's. Those who support Republicans side with Kavanaugh's narrative and see holes in Ford's. I can think of few exceptions. I'm joined now by former White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer. He's a Fox News contributor and one of our dear friends here at the show. Ari, let me just ask you about your overall perception. I follow you on Twitter. I watch you on Fox News. I know you a little bit. But I think the viewers would like to hear from your perspective, having been working on Capitol Hill, having been at the White House, having been knowing somebody like Brett Kavanaugh, and understanding the process. What are your thoughts today?
You have to hate all of this. I mean, this is not the way the Washington that I knew when I first moved down there, and I started on Capitol Hill in 1983. This is just not how Washington worked. Washington used to work by Democrats and Republicans figuring out the big things and putting institutions first, and an understanding that presidents are entitled to get members who they appoint through the process. That's all broken down now. Now it's just hand-to-hand combat, and frankly, it's up to the voters, Dana. The Senate and the presidency will be determined by whoever the people decide should be there. And if Republicans win in the fall, it means Republicans can continue to have candidates appointed to the judiciary and confirmed by the Senate. Elections do matter in this day and age, of course.
I know you've been looking a lot, and we always appreciate your thoughts about the media. I wanted to read this to you from the New Yorker today. This line caught me. Kavanaugh has no avenue of appeal, though, except his own hurt feelings. He is in touch with them as he was taught to be. And so he's seemingly weaponized crying the way a little boy does when he's in trouble. Any thoughts on that as a father of a son?
Write the exact same thing about a woman, and you would know how everybody would scream how unjust that is. Listen, I think Brett Kavanaugh acted in a perfectly rational, human manner. This is what you naturally do if you're accused of something that you know you did not do. If you didn't do it, it pains you. And it wasn't just the Professor Ford allegation. Remember, in that intervening week, Brett Kavanaugh had to watch false accusation after false accusation, people recanting their accusations that he made. And NBC and other media outlets instantly slapped accusations on the air without any vetting. That's what Brett Kavanaugh went through. So naturally, he's going to lash out, to react as any individual who is innocent would do. I think if Brett hadn't reacted like that, we'd all be more suspect of Brett. He acted the way anybody who's innocent would react.
And he wasn't in a position of being a judge at the time. I did want to ask you about this. There's divisions amongst families and between friends, but even now it's coming to corporate America. Facebook holding a town hall meeting of IT employees today, well, all of their employees, after many of them expressed outrage at the company's head of global policy, Joel Kaplan. You and I worked with him at the White House. He was expressing support for Brett Kavanaugh by attending this hearing last week. Kaplan writing in a memo to staff, "I want to apologize. I recognize this moment is a deeply painful one internally and externally." And then Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg also reaching out to employees saying, "I've talked to Joel about why I think it was a mistake for him to attend given his role in the company. We support people's right to do what they want in their personal time, but this was by no means a straightforward case." I wondered what you think about this. They had to have a global meeting about it. I know that Joel Kaplan and Brett Kavanaugh have been friends for 20 years. Their families have grown up together. They all know each other. And also, Facebook has constantly pointed to Joel Kaplan as the conservative that works at Facebook to protect themselves against claims about bias against conservatives.
Once again, reverse the situation. Do you think if anybody from Facebook or anybody in corporate America or any industry in America sat in that room as an expression of support for their friend, Professor Ford, that their entity, their corporation, their movie studio would have a hand-wringing session to say, how could that person possibly sit there on behalf of Professor Ford? Of course they would think it was appropriate. But because a Republican, a conservative, is doing it on behalf of another Republican or conservative, it all of a sudden leads to this hand-wringing at Facebook.
Yeah. Well,
look,
sources...
academia gave people days off. The college campuses gave people days off so they could come to Washington to protest. They canceled classes. Hollywood actors and actresses came to Washington to get arrested. All of that is fine and good. But when the cultural conservative side, anybody expresses support for Brett Kavanaugh, that is no longer good. It is a hypocritical double standard, and shame on Facebook for putting Joel Kaplan through.
We had some notes that we had somebody send us some notes about the meeting, that there's expressed frustration. He explained his personal values, emphasized that Facebook is a place where diverse points of view are supported. So anyway, Ari Fleischer, we're going to have to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
So a sudden scare for the First Lady, but everything was okay during her trip to Africa. Details on that next. Is about to take the floor and announce her vote on Brett Kavanaugh. Today's divided Senate vote setting up a weekend battle for his final confirmation. For what to look for, Chad Pergram joins me from Capitol Hill. You've got a few scenarios. Run us through them.
Yes, we have 5 scenarios here, and I'm going to read them to you because it's a little hard to understand here. So let's say Susan Collins is a yes. In order for Brett Kavanaugh to get to confirmation, either Joe Manchin or Lisa Murkowski need to be yeas. That gets you to 51. Here's scenario 2. Let's say Collins is a yes, and Manchin and Murkowski are both no's. That means there's 50 yeas. You need the vice president to break the tie. Scenario 3, Collins is a no, Manchin is a yes, and Murkowski is a no. That means you're at 50 yeas. You also need Pence to break the tie. Then scenario 4, Collins is a no, Manchin is a no, Murkowski is a yay. Also means there's 50 yeas. Again, Mike Pence comes in to break the tie. And then there's scenario number 5, Dana. If Collins is a no, Manchin is a no, Murkowski is a no, that means they're only at 49 yeas. That means game over for Brett Kavanaugh.
So then what do you think is Senator Collins coming to the podium in about 9 minutes? What do you think she's going to say? She just had lunch with Mitch McConnell, and apparently he expressed optimism afterwards.
Right. Well, I would also look at Joe Manchin's vote. You know, sometimes when senators vote to end debate with both, which is what happened with both Manchin and Collins earlier, they don't always reflect that in the confirmation vote or vote on final passage. A lot of senators will say, well, I'll always vote for cloture. I'll vote to end debate. So those two things don't always align. So your guess is as good as mine. But one thing we've thought here for days on Capitol Hill is that no Democrat, including Joe Manchin, would be the one to push this across the finish line if the Republicans can't cough up the necessary votes for Brett Kavanaugh on their own, Dana.
How is it possible that Senator Murkowski is saying that she is still on the fence when she has said she voted no to end debate, and she said that she doesn't think that he's the right man for the job?
Right. Well, she's sort of undeclared at this point, but people are reading into that statement saying it would be hard for her to come back from that vote this morning where she voted no and come back from that statement and actually vote yes. You know, she's undeclared. That's the official position right now. We hope we have some clarity from her sometime later this afternoon. Of course, the confirmation vote we don't expect before 4:52 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. That's 30 hours after they close the vote this morning. 30 hours.
Why is it 30 hours?
Well, that's very interesting. You know, it used to be 100 hours in the Senate, Dana. The idea that there was 1 hour per senator. And in the mid-1980s, they put the Senate on television, and they wanted to be more television friendly. So 30 hours was the most that any senator had ever used after they invoked cloture. Mark Hatfield, a Republican from Oregon, on a bill about the draft in 1979.
Now, in your scenarios, you didn't talk about Senator Steve Daines of Montana. His daughter has a wedding. Of course, he wants to be at the wedding, but he told Kavanaugh he will be there if he needs to be there. How does he play into those scenarios that you talked about?
Well, if they're at 50 votes without Steve Daines, you can confirm Brett Kavanaugh 50 to 49 with 99 senators there. That's possible. But what they could do is also hold the vote open as long as they need to. The record is 5 hours and 15 minutes on the stimulus package. In February of 2009, they brought in Sherrod Brown, Democrat from Ohio, to cast the decisive vote. They needed 60 on the stimulus package in 2009. His mother had passed away, and he attended the wake, and they brought him back in after 5 hours and 15 minutes. He cast the deciding vote, 60-38, and they passed the stimulus package for President Obama in February of 2009.
How many senators do you need to agree to extend debate?
It doesn't. Well, it's not an issue of extending debate. So the debate will cut off.
Or holding open the vote.
It doesn't matter. It's up to Mitch McConnell. It's kind of like soccer. Time is kept on the field, and you don't really know when the injury and booking time expires.
I'm sorry, if I could just go back to your last scenario, if the Republicans only get to 49. How does Steve Daines fit into that scenario?
Well, if they're at 49, they need to get to 50 and say Steve Daines is at his daughter's wedding in Montana. He would be vote 50 in that scenario, and you'd be 50-50. Then you would need Vice President Pence to come and break the tie.
Well,
Vice
so then
President
in
Pence
any
has broken
scenario, in all of your scenarios, does Brett Kavanaugh get confirmed?
Well, yes. I mean, there are 2 of the 5 I laid out here where, yes, he does get confirmed, depending on Collins. But again, you know, there are a lot of different tributaries and alleyways that this could take, depending on Daines' presence, depending on how Collins votes, depending on how Manchin votes. I tell you, I think I lost brain cells trying to think out all these, trying to game all these scenarios out here just before we came on the air.
Well, it's possible that in just a few minutes, when Senator Collins comes out and gives her statement, then you can get back some brain cells, because that will help your math a little bit.
I need that, definitely.
All right, Chad Pergram, we appreciate it. Thank you, and we'll be right back.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you.
All of the news on Kavanaugh, and right now we are just about a minute away from when Senator Susan Collins of Maine is to announce her vote and her decision on how she will vote tomorrow on Judge Brett Kavanaugh for that final vote for his confirmation to the United States Supreme Court. As you just saw with Chad Pergram, there's lots of different scenarios that could take place when you have a vote that's this close. He talked about being at 51 votes, 50 votes, or just 49 votes. As soon as we know what Senator Susan Collins is going to decide, we'll be able to figure out those scenarios and narrow them down. If she's a yes, the path to getting to confirmation much, much easier. Probably everyone breathes a sigh of relief on the Republican side. If she's a no, there are other things that have to happen, but that does not mean that Brett Kavanaugh's nomination would not happen or confirmation would not happen.